Hello everyone. Today's video we are going to be looking at games from Garry Kasparov with the black pieces and specifically his response to the Torre Attack, which is related to the family of the Kali and London systems. For those of you who do not know what the Torre Attack looks like, it's more of a system, right? So basically, you will have the same looking pawn formation as the white pieces, um, mostly against pretty much a variety of black setups. All right, you're pretty much going to have this kind of Slav pawn structure with the knights being on d2 and f3. The difference is that instead of this dark square bishop being inside the pawn chain, as you would have in your Kali system, right in the both Zukertort variation and Koltanowski variations, um, you have your bishop on g5. The difference also between this and the London system is that in the London system, your bishop would be on f4. Also, in the Torre Attack, many times you will find this bishop on e2 as opposed to d3, where white is sometimes susceptible to tactical um, uh, trouble from black after moves like e5 and like say e4, where there would be a pin involved. And besides, with the fianchetto of the dark square bishop here, uh, this pawn on g6 is nothing but granted anyway for this bishop to bite upon. So you'll see many players placing their bishop on e2. All right. Now, Kasparov's response is important to us because him being a renowned King's Indian player and former world champion, uh, the odds are very high that there will be a number of significant games where he would have to face such a variation, right? The Torre Attack, London system, Kali system, right? They're all related, and you can and should play all three at one point in your chess career, right? It's a good position to learn, good system to learn, or good systems rather to learn. Now, these aren't systems that you see consistently at the highest levels of chess, right? And you're more likely to see some kind of Queen's Gambit, right? More aggressive systems, but again, these take a lot of preparation. Now, why would a top level grandmaster play such a system, right? That is not really known to confer an advantage for white against a player like Kasparov. One is because he was a known King's Indian defense specialist, right? Kasparov, besides being enormously talented himself, also had a great team of grandmasters, right, working with him, helping him prepare his lines. So many players just did not want to walk into that immense preparation, and they would choose these sidelines, for example. Another instance would be after knight f6, bishop g5, Chompovsky. Sometimes you will see that against, again, King's Indian or Nimzo Indian players. So we're going to look at only Garry Kasparov's response uh, to the Torre Attack. So in all games shown, he will have the black pieces. And now we step in our time machine and we go all the way back to 1980, where Kasparov was just a rising young star. In this game, with the white pieces, is a Bulgarian chess grandmaster, Nikola Spiridonov, who's IM International Master in 1970, became a GM in 79. He opened the game with the flexible knight f3, g6 from Kasparov, d4, knight f6, bishop g5, bishop g7, knight bd2, and sometimes e3 is played first, but knight bd2 gives black a little more to think about, as white is also threatening to play e4 in one shot as opposed to e3. Kasparov challenges the center with c5, and now we go into this common line. Bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, knight e4, bishop takes d4, and now we are at this middle game with a set of minor pieces taken off the board. In this game, this position could be considered equal. Yeah, there's an attack on the rook, but black loses no time here, as he can just simply castle out of it. c4. And Spiridonov's mindset here is to simply transpose into a Marazzi bond type position. As you can see, we have transposed into a variation of the Sicilian, and after d6. And so it's a question that you might want to ask yourself: is white in the better variation of the Sicilian, or is he in the inferior variation of the Sicilian, or is it just equal? After all, black no longer has his bishop on g7, right? But some minor pieces are missing from the board. And after bishop e6, e4, we can say that, again, as usual in these Marazzi bond positions, the bishop on f1 is bad. And now the typical themes are what we see. Black trying to break the Marazzi bond by attacking either the c pawn or the e pawn, and white trying to keep it strong here. So b3, f5 from Kasparov, bishop e2, and then Kasparov just simply plays f4. Of course, f takes e4 was possible. Kasparov plays f4 here. Knight d5. Bishop takes d5, queen takes d5, check, king g7. In these type of positions, black usually wants to play in a more dynamic spirit, since his pawn structure is inferior to white's, right? And his pieces are a little bit better, especially his minor piece, the strong knight versus the weak bishop. He has this advanced pawn on the f file, and his development is a little bit better here. So black usually wants to play in a dynamic fashion. White usually wants to try to calm things down and go into an endgame where he can benefit in a safe manner from from black's weaknesses left on the board. So now b4, Spiridonov actually decides to play in a dynamic way himself, and he offers this pawn as bait, is b4. But Kasparov just takes. Now, I think even a stronger move in the vein of playing dynamically is this move f3. So, for instance, after f3, say bishop takes f3, we can already see that rook takes c4 is very strong. So, therefore, the white king side must be ripped open. Knight f3 check. And let's say king g2. Knight takes h2 is possible. King takes h2. Rook takes f2. Check. That's just one line that's possible. Very, very aggressive. I don't know if it'll lead to a draw, but I think black is okay there. But even instead of taking on h2, if you're not sure about that, black can just come back to e5 here with the knight. Instead, Kasparov just took, and Spiridonov's plan is just to play rook b1 and obtain entry to the 7th rank. So rook takes b1, king f6 by Kasparov, and after all, it looks like a reasonable plan. Black's king side is a little compromised as far as the pawn. It looks like a Dutch defense, right? The formation where the bishop has been removed off g7, and so now there's all kind of weaknesses around the king side. So it looks like definitely a decent plan here. Spiridonov plays h4. Now h6 from Kasparov. I like rook b8. Rook d1. Rook b8, there it is. Rook c7. And now rook fc8. Rook takes. Queen b7. And now queen c5 here. Queen b2. Queen b6. So Kasparov is now off in the endgame. Spiridonov is rejecting that offer. G5, and now rook D5. E6, H takes G5 check, H takes G5, and now rook D1. And this pawn is definitely a burden for white here. King E7, Queen C2, and now rook B8. Queen A4, G4, Queen A3, Queen C5, again offering the endgame. Queen C3, G3. Very strong move by Kasparov, again exploiting this pin here. Rook F1 now. G takes F2, rook takes F2, and now the pieces just come flooding in. Rook FB1, rook B1. The bishop is forced to come back. Queen E3, queen takes, F takes E3, and rook C2, and just very powerful move. And finally, black achieves his victory and destroys the Maroczy bind setup here. Of course, the bishop is pinned, so it cannot capture, and the rook, if the rook captures, then the pawn will just play the E2 and pin this piece. So therefore, Spiridonov resigned. Our next game came from the Thessaloniki Olympiad in 1988, and with the white pieces none other than Eugenio Torre, whose namesake this opening is taken after. Right? Who was Eugenio Torre? Right? He's a Filipino grandmaster. He was also the first Asian grandmaster at 22 years old. All right, and he won the bronze medal in the chess Olympiads for the Philippines, also defeating Anatoly Karpov on the way to that bronze medal. Another interesting fact about him is that he was a second, right, or an assistant for you new chess people, to Bobby Fischer in his return match in 1992 in Yugoslavia against Boris Spassky. So here he is playing his own pet system against world champion now in 1988, Garry Kasparov. So C3 here, so we can see the same setup, different move orders here. This time, Kasparov plays a Grunfeld type setup, right? Instead of playing D6, going into King's Indian, he prevents E4, at least for the time being, by playing D5. So knight BD2, knight BD7, again, there's your setup. Here, after castles, typical plan in the Torre attack, which is not so much to attack on the king side, but to play a king side attack and restricting white over here, and sometimes opening up lines on this side of the board. Kasparov plays C6, bishop E2, rook E, H6, bishop H4, and now A5. What this does here is it forces black to, forces white to make a decision about what he's going to do with these pawns. If he captures here, right, he gets the open position on the king side, the queen side, right? And let's say after E4, knight E4, knight E1, and then queen takes A5, black has pressure on the A pawn, and white has to keep guarding this A pawn. This is not necessarily ideal for him. He's not lost or anything, but it's not ideal having to guard this weakness with his pieces. All right. The other choice is what he did in the game, and he played the move B5. All right. Now, ideally, white would like to be able to capture here. However, Kasparov just simply bypasses everything and plays C5. This is one of the benefits of having the knight here, is that you can support an advance on C5 and E5, which is exactly what Kasparov does. Not only does this increase pressure on the center, but it cripples black's ideas of opening anything up on the queen side, which is the reason why he played b4 in the first place. Yeah, he has space over there, but what good is having the space over here in the queen side if your opponent is dominating in the center? All right, this is one of the chess fundamentals, is that when someone attacks on the flanks, right, it's best to counterattack in the center of the board, and that's what we see here. So Torre takes, right? He can't just allow black to have this huge center, and eventually he's gonna play a move e4 if allowed, and just blow black off the board, right? Either e4 or c4 at some point, right? So, for example, it's hard to even find moves for white at this point. Queen c2, e4 is good for black, or e takes, c takes. Again, e4 is good for black. E takes is also good for black. And then c4. You had the pass pawn here, and then you also had the domination over the e file. So Torre decided to take. However, this leaves him with the isolated pawn, and it also makes this bishop very strong in this diagonal. Knight takes, rook takes. He decides to take the knight, and this is a common theme in the Torre attack. It's done at different times where the bishop trades itself for the knight, and here he's trying to weaken the defense of this pawn so that he may attack it more effectively. Bishop takes, and the rook comes off the diagonal, c1, albeit in the passive role. b6. This completes the solidification of the queen side. White has no prospects on that side of the board. Bishop g4, trying to exchange his bad bishop for white's good bishop. White's good bishop for white's bad bishop for black's good bishop. Bishop f3, and now queen e7, c4, and notice the simplicity of black's play. The rook's just everything in the center of the board, very strong, and all of his pieces are better than their counterparts. All of black's pieces are slightly better than Torre's pieces. Queen c2, and just d4, advancing, very strong moves. Bishop takes b7, queen takes b7, e takes d4, rook takes d4. So now, again, the rooks are still centralized, and we see the pressure on these queenside pawns at this. Okay, sorry about that. I had a phone call. All right. Anyway, I forgot where I was, so we're gonna start at a random spot. Just kidding, not so random, but anyway, the thought is gonna be different from what I left off on. So anyway, so after e takes d4, rook takes d4, rook c e1. So basically, Torre is just trying to alleviate the pressure, right? His rook on c1 is doing nothing. Rook on e5 is dominating the position, right? He doesn't want to allow, say, a move like rook e2, for example, from Kasparov. So he goes to trade it off. Rook takes e1, rook takes e1. So this is good, right? Because, you know, at least Torre has gotten rid of his rook ends up on the e file, all right? But Kasparov still has ways to maintain the pressure. So queen d7 and knight f1. So you might say, hey, what about knight f3? Knight f3 is not bad, but Torre has a different plan in mind, right? Knight f3 could just be met by rook d3. Black is still better, okay? But the plan that Torre has in mind is to alleviate the queen from having to guard this pawn. Now, we all know, right, especially those of us that have been playing chess a while, we know that we don't want, like, our heavy pieces, our high-ranking pieces doing things like guarding pawns, right, blockading pawns and things like that, right? Those are definitely indicative of having a bad position. When your queen is just relegated to guarding pawns and stuff like that, or your rooks, those are signs of a bad position, right? I can look at the chessboard and see if that's going on, your position is probably bad. All right, those pieces are designed to attack and take control of the board. Okay, if you look at the black's pieces, they aren't guarding anything. They were all in dominating positions. So knight f1. What's the reason for knight f1? Well, Torre just wants to play knight e3. So with the knight on e3, it guards the pawn now. So, right, you don't want to have to do that, but hey, if somebody has to guard the pawn, let it be the low-ranking piece. h5. So Kasparov keeps attacking. All right, this is one of those principles of weaknesses on the board. Like, yes, those pawns are weak on the queen side, but Kasparov can't really build up pressure like against them. So he's just probing, creating some more weaknesses on the board, right? Without compromising his own position. So g3, h4, and now knight e3, queen e6, queen e2, and now rook e4. And here Torre plays g takes h4, and then Kasparov plays bishop c3. Of course, he could have just took the pawn, but he plays this, rook d1, and now he takes with the rook. Queen f3, bishop d4. Again, look at the domination on display here. Knight g2, rook h3, queen d5, queen f6, and you can just see Kasparov just squeezing more and more out of the position. Rook f3, king h1, rook takes f2. So he just basically just squeezed the pawn out of him. So check it out. If rook f1, right, that's the natural move, right? The position just collapses after bishop takes e3. Okay, what do you do about rook takes f1? So this is why he just had to give up the pawn like that. Rook takes f2, knight g4, right? Looks great, but queen f3 check, queen takes f3, rook takes f3, and now rook e1. And now, right, after creating a disturbance on the queen side, on the king side, you see how black now returns to the scene of the crime, which is the queen side, right? He was putting all that pressure on the queen side, but he realized, okay, I have no way to break through. So what he did is he created the distraction on the other side of the board, and now he returns to the queen side. Now there's no way for Torre to defend himself over there. Rook e8 check, king g7, rook b8. And of course, white's attack is faster because his pieces were better placed. Rook a6 and rook b4. And after that, Torre resigned. Let me just point out that, say after rook takes a5, then just simply c4. And the problem with this position is either this pawn is going to promote or Torre is going to lose his knight in this position. Notice that this knight has nowhere to go. The bishop is very powerfully placed to stop the knight. So let's say, for instance, I don't know, let's make up some moves here, right? Rook a6, right? Then just simply f5. And notice with the bishop guarding the 7th rank, you can't even check right there. Another idea for white to try to do is play a move like king g2, which allows the defense knight to f2 in case of f5. But then, of course, you can play, f5 again, and then after knight f2, just rook b2. So you can see with these problems in the position, why white resigned. Another move is just simply c3. And this is why Torre had to resign. So check that position out if you want. And there's a few more variations that are pretty cool there. But believe me, the resignation is by no means premature. Next game, 1991 Linares, and with the white pieces is Dutch Grandmaster Jan Timman. Okay, he was GM since 1974 and at his peak, number 3 in the world. And just to tell you a little bit about Timman, at one time he was considered the best in the West, and that title was conferred on players who basically were outside of the Soviet system, right? uh, that were great players. So you had players like Fischer, Bobby Fischer, Bent Larson, all right, that were considered the best Western players in their times, right? Because the Soviets dominated chess for many, many, many years. I mean, they had tons of grandmasters. So every time, like, some real strong player would pop up, from the West, from in the Western side of things, it was like that was like a big celebration, you know. So to be the best in the West was like, whoa, that was like that was a big time achievement. So Timman at one time was probably the strongest player, out of the Western European grandmasters. So here he is playing Kasparov in 1991. So again, here we see the Torre Attack, and with this move, knight BD2. Again, he's saying, hey, I might play E4. If you play D6, I might just play E4. So Kasparov just plays D5. E3, because if you remember, Kasparov also played the Grunfeld, so a position is by no means unfamiliar to him. C5, C3, sticking with our setup. Right, Torre Attack. Knight BD7, Queen B3 from Timman. Castles, Bishop E2, B6, and this is all typical stuff here. Castles, Bishop B7. Black is equalized, right? And white seeks to try to get some type of advantage in middle game complications. A6 from Kasparov. Rook FD1. Queen B8. This protects the bishop in certain lines, right? And also gets the queen right off of the D file where the rook is. All right. Another idea that Kasparov has is bringing the queen also to A7 here. So bishop F4, queen A7, knight E5 from Timman, E6, queen A3, and we can see just the game that's being played with the pressure of the pawns. Of course, typical move that we've seen from Torre is this move B4, rook AC8, B4. Kasparov takes, knight takes E5, bishop takes E5, and then C4. Again, we see the same idea of shutting down white's queen side events. Basically, the business on the queen side is closed. Rook E1, bishop C6, bishop F3, queen comes to B7, B5, and maybe this move is perhaps is black's best move here. Queen D7 is also possible. Again, just like a probing move. But after B5, then after Queen D7, then maybe white plays B5. So B5 here from Kasparov. A takes B5, A takes B5. And this is good. This is good for white. White doesn't have a huge advantage, but it's a good position. Here he decides to part ways with his bishop. I'm not too sure about that move, right? But I get it. He wants to play E4. And again, this is common themes. He wants to play E4 here. But another idea is to play Rook A5 and double up. Double up rooks here. But perhaps he didn't see a great future after Rook A8, Rook Rook A1. Knight D7 takes, and I don't know, bishop D1 perhaps. Reason why I say bishop D1 is because this knight wants to come here and then play a move like this. So bishop D1 kind of stops that idea. All right, and then play would go back and forth. I mean, E5 is possible at this point. Or you could still do knight b6 and then an idea like f6 and e5. So the game is definitely like an equal game. It should end in a draw. So here Timman decides on a different plan. He gets rid of the knight, supporting e4 for black, and then plays e4 himself. Rook a e8, So now you can see, of course, black contesting the file. Now e5, g3, rook takes, and now just f5, and now bishop e2. If Timman wanted to fight here, he should have took en passant if he wanted to keep it moving here. Then you have rook e1, of course, rook e8, and black will get in e5 eventually. So this is probably why he decided to go against it. So for instance, here, let's say here, then that's coming. D takes. I don't know, take with the bishop or the rook. Let's take with the rook. You know, you have a position like this again. You know, drawish looking position. So he played bishop e2, kept things locked up. Rook a8, f4, bishop e7, knight f3, rook takes, queen a8, and they shook hands here. So it's an interesting position. I mean, that's high quality play on both sides. 1991, you had Garry Kasparov near the peak of his powers, if not in the very prime of his powers. That's a good question I want to ask the audience. What time period do you think Garry Kasparov was at the height of his powers? Would you say it was like the late 80s, early 90s, or like late 90s? Like, when I say late 90s, I'm saying after 1995, 96, 97, 98, during that time, right? Because we know he lost the title to Kramnik in 2000. So would you say late 90s Kasparov, early 90s Kasparov, late 80s Kasparov? I won't say he was the strongest in the early 80s because, again, Kasparov almost lost the match to Karpov 84, 85. Like, he was still coming up. So that's a good question I want to throw out there for you guys. Which Kasparov do you think was the strongest Kasparov? So anyway, this game ended in a draw. Back in the time machine, a few years later, 1991. That was 1991. So we get back in the time machine. We flying to Amsterdam, and it's 1994. Here's Jan Timman again, right? Versus Garry Kasparov. Same opening. So Garry Kasparov switches it up a little bit. So Timman, instead of playing knight bd2 as he played before, right, with this idea of, you know, feigning e4 and Kasparov responding with d5. Instead, he just plays c3. Kasparov plays b6. And here, Timman decides he's getting an e4 anyway. So he plays bishop takes, and e4. Bishop b7, bishop d3, c5, d5, e6, bishop c4. Of course, c3 would be a nice move to be able to make, but it loses in this particular position. This is why he plays this move, bishop c4. He could also just castle here, but he plays bishop c4, castles. Knight to a6, queen d3, knight c7, and very ambitious play by Timman here, d6, knight e8, and I like this position for white. It's definitely different, but I do like the position. Knight bd2, bishop g7, Kasparov, and now with the cramped position that black has, white feels justified in launching an attack here. So he plays h4, a6, a4, stopping the b5 advance. Now e5. And of course, black has a way to attack this structure, and that's with this pawn f6. So he has to break down the base of the chain, and he definitely needs to get rid of these pawns, and so his play will be centered around that for the next few moves. f6, h5. Of course, when f6 is played, it compromises the king side structure, so That's what happened. So h5, f takes e5, h takes, and now Kasparov plays h6. So it keeps the position kind of closed, right? Keeps his king protected. Another idea was h takes g6, queen takes g6, rook f6. So this play is a little more enterprising, but it allows black, in my opinion, to almost turn the tables. Knight d6. So there's the pawn. So now black has freed himself from this bind here. And you can see in this variation, black actually benefits from the open files here. Okay, so h takes g6, good option here. h6 gives white some time. He just plays rook fe1, queen takes, and now they go into this endgame. So black accomplishes his goal of tearing down that a strong looking center that white set up. But now he's in this endgame. The knight takes e5. So again, game's pretty equal. Rook f4, bishop d3, rook a f8, and we see Kasparov doing what he does with the beautiful placement, coordination of his pieces. a5, so he gets those pawns off the light squares. So now that bishop on b7 is free to operate. King g7. So that pawn is now pretty much a liability on g6. So you could definitely take a few lessons from this game, because you saw the cramped position that black was in, and you also can learn a lot about overextending the position. And it's kind of like Timman did, and not that he didn't see that those pawns will fall eventually. He probably thought he would have more compensation than he did. Knight e8, king g3, knight f6, rook e5, knight comes to d5. Kasparov is great at positioning his pieces. I love the harmony of Kasparov, of his pieces. He always seems to put his pieces in great positions. Right? They just look like that's where they belong. So here we are with these tactics here. Again, I mean, do I need to talk about the tactical ability of Kasparov? I mean, you have to look that up. This dude was something else. And even at this age, when he appears every now and then and plays Blitz and stuff like that, dude is amazing. Knight c4, right? I mean, it looks killer here. I mean, with this, first of all, remove this knight, you attack this pawn. You had these ideas of the knight sitting in on d6. So Kasparov plays knight f4 here, and the bishop is just hanging. Bishop takes, right? But remember, this bishop is protecting this pawn. So bishop takes, and that leaves the rook takes g6. And notice this pawn here. So king h2, rook g2. Ouch. Very strong play by Kasparov. He sacrifices a piece. d5. So now he shuts the bishop off. So the bishop can't get back to defend. Right? So knight takes b6. He doesn't care about that because these pieces are kind of out of the important area of play. Rook b8. Right? So he gets the piece back. If knight e3 here, right, attacking the rook, then another pawn gets picked up. Rook takes b2. And let's say rook g1, king f6 attacking the rook. Right, keeping the attacking going. Where's this rook going? So knight g1 check. King to e7. And then perhaps bishop a6. And white is in a lot of trouble here. So Timman decided to play knight takes b6. right? And give the piece back instead of trying to hold on to it. So rook b8, rook takes e6, rook takes b7. All right, so now the pawns are even, but black's pieces, right, are placed in an intimidating fashion. But the game is equal right here. At this moment, rook is attacked, so rook d6. Kasparov plays rook g5, right? He keeps an eye on this pawn, but ominously keeping this king kind of like trapped in this corner. A little bit uncomfortable. He plays rook d1. Now, personally, I like to move rook g1 because I want my king to be trapped in this corner. Right? So a sample line could be rook g1 and rook takes, king takes, and at least the king is free now. Right? But what happened is rook d1 instead. So Timman says, okay, so what? My king is over here. I'm going to put more pressure on this pawn. Right? It's hard to blame him. But so d4 is played, and again rook g1 is an option. He underestimates Timman, that is, he underestimates the condition, and the placement of this king right here. He feels he's safe, right? So Timman plays the move knight c4, right? And it looks like a decent move. He's attacking this pawn, protecting this pawn, right? It doesn't look too bad, right? Perhaps capture here, capture twice on d4, but Kasparov just simply plays the move king h7, and Timman is lost. There's no adequate protection for the king. Amazing game. So rook e1 and just simply rook h5. The reason why he moves the king over is because it clears the g7 square for the other rook to come over. So rook h5, king g1, rook g7, and Timman resign. The game is over. It's mate in 4 moves here. At the rook g6, that's a computer move. Rook g6. If king f1, then the rook comes down. So here it is if you want to see it. So king f1, rook h1, king f2, rook g2, checkmate. So just like that, knight c4 just took that one move. Maybe it was a time control situation, but nevertheless, just fantastic. This is classic Kasparov, this type of stuff. Right? Just simple move, king h7, and the swarming attack of the pieces. Right? If Kasparov didn't play king h7, if he played a move like d takes c3, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. Yeah, he would be a little better. Right, but the result of the game is still up for grabs. Although black has extra pawn, but after king h7, there is no question about it. All right, fantastic game by Kasparov. I urge you to study this game. 1995 at the PCA Intel Grand Prix. PCA standing for Professional Chess Association, which was an organization I believe started by Garry Kasparov and Nigel Short. And this was this was basically like a rebellion against FIDE and how they were structured, etc., etc. And there were all type of problems. You could research that also, the history of the PCA Chess Association. This World Chess Championship match held under its authority, which was the I believe it's 1993 match of Garry Kasparov between Nigel Short. So here with the white pieces is English Grandmaster Jonathan Speelman, who a little bit eccentric. He's a mathematician, right? Einstein type, big curly hair, right? International master in 1978. And then became a GM. I forgot what year. I shouldn't be going off memory here. I have to look that up. Maybe 1980, something like that. But for some reason, I thought it took a few years before he became a grandmaster. But anyway, 3-time British champion And his peak, he's fourth in the world, 1989. So these are some heavy hitters playing the Torre Attack against Kasparov. It's not just like, like me playing it against Kasparov, somebody rated 2400. So again, trying to avoid, and these are serious games too, trying to avoid that vaunted preparation in the Grunfeld and King's Indian. Here, right, we see the same idea, feinting e4. And remember, Timman had played in this way, and Kasparov decided to play the move d5. Here, Kasparov just plays castle. Says, go ahead, play e4 if you want. He calls Speelman's bluff. Speelman plays c3. h6, questioning the bishop. Bishop takes f6. E takes f6. And of course, this is like a dynamic way of playing. Of course, you could take with the bishop, right? But you create some imbalances in the position. All right, g3, f5, right? So now you have like almost like a hybrid Dutch, except you don't have to worry about the e pawn coming here. So now you're gonna use this pawn that's doubled, right, as a protector of e4. So if white ever wants to achieve e4, he's gonna help you straighten out your pawns. This is a common idea played in different openings. So bishop d2, d6, castle. So just a humble opening by white. Queen c2, rook e8, knight f6. Again with the, basically if white's not going to take control of e4, black will. So knight e1, h5, h4. We can see white playing this positional game, trying to get white to black to kind of weaken himself, right, so he can exploit these squares that are left over. So for instance, after getting h5 out of black and then playing h4 himself, he can plan a knight here, right, and not have to worry about it. So knight e4 and knight f4, queen e7, b4. Again, typical of the Torre attack with this advance on the queen side. So basically, he kind of holds up any ideas black might have of attacking on the king side, and now he goes for his attack on the queen side. So that was a general strategy, right? He limits black's options on that side of the board, and now he's gonna attack on the queen side. a4, rook ac8, rook a b1. So here it comes. b6, queen d3, bishop h6, rook f to e1, knight f6, knight f3, knight e4, c4. So we can see the subtlety that Speelman is using in advancing these pawns. You have to make sure that your attack does not get, just get blockaded, right? Where you push a pawn and then the opponent pushes past you and then that's it. You always have to have a position where either you can open the position when you need to, or at least your opponent can't afford to close the position, right? The tension in the position is okay, but for your opponent to be able to shut it down, that's usually not too good. So queen d8, knight d2, knight f6, and now on b5, right? So b5 is played, but after c5, notice black still cannot just shut the position down. See, it's not like the position is locked up like that, where white can't really do anything. See, if the position was like this, then the only option white can really look forward to opening up the position is he has to work on playing a move like this, a5, etc. But here, he's able to play d takes c5, d takes c5, and he still has this at some point. Not now, of course, but the option is there, right? So his king side attack is not over. Notice the bishop's very powerful on this diagonal, right? So there will be no rook to a8 and things like that, right? He will have to prepare to take over this diagonal from this bishop. Knight d5, bishop e6, rook b d1, bishop to f8, queen b3, bishop takes d5, c takes d5, right? So now he has a passed pawn. This knight will come here to blockade this pawn. Also assist in this move if necessary. Knight c4, knight g4 from Kasparov. There it is, a5. Knight e5, a takes, rook a1. Now he takes over the file, and of course, this is idea. Also, along with this, so Kasparov cannot allow this pressure to linger here, so this guy has to go. So bishop e5, rook a6, and one thing that's good for Kasparov here is having this bishop here guarding a1, so it's going to take white an extra move to dominate that file with his rooks. So queen d6, and this is why you see this move. So rook e7, and then now you see rook a4 here played. Okay, of course the natural move is this rook ea2. All right, and this game ended in a draw. All right, so very good game played by Speelman against Kasparov. Kasparov didn't dominate the position at all. If anything, we could say that white has definitely a more pleasant position. We're not going to go and say, oh, white is better and all stuff. The position is definitely more pleasant. But again, you know, the practicality and the results are what matters. You got the opposite color bishops here. Hard for white to make progress without trading everything off and going into opposite color bishops ending. But well played by Speelman against the world champion Garry Kasparov. Next game is the same year, 1995. Novgorod against Artur Yusupov. Yusupov comes from that era, you know, of Kasparov, right? Karpov, right? Little younger than Karpov, you know, around Kasparov's age. Belyavsky, so late 70s, early 80s. That was like the new generation of grandmasters taking over, right? Yusupov, Timman, right? Short, like all of these younger grandmasters, right? He was international master in 1977, world junior champ in 1980, three-time world candidate for the World Chess Championship. And the thing about Yusupov, he was a student of Dvoretsky. But here was the thing with Yusupov. This guy he made it to the semifinals in the candidates three times, 86, 89, 92, and lost in the semifinals all three times. So never got that crack at the World Championship, but came so close. So is he in the discussion as one of the strongest players never to play for the World Championship? Usually players like Korchnoi, right, Karas are mentioned, right, as players, that close, right? Yusupov, semifinalist three times, never made it. Interesting trivia about Yusupov was that he used to live in Russia, near Moscow, and then sometime in the 90s he was shot. He actually walked in on some burglars in his apartment. So some guys were robbing his house and they shot him. And luckily for him, he survived. And good for him, shortly afterward, he moved to Germany. So, and then he won the German chess championship in 2005. So Yusupov is still alive. He's a national coach for Germany. Wrote many books. Very strong player. And at his peak, I think he was like number 3 in the world. Something, either 2 or 3 in the world. I think 3 though. He was behind Karpov. I don't think he ever passed Karpov, but he usually was Kasparov, Karpov, Yusupov. That was like your. And sometimes you have Timman in there, right? Those are like your top 3-4 players in the late 80s before the next generation of players would come, which would be Shirov, Anand, Kramnik, right? Ivanchuk. That was like your next crop, but coming up on the scene. So again, we have this setup, right, with the pawns and it's almost like a reverse Slav, right? And now queen b6. and queen b3, right? And now we have our kind of like Torre Attack, kind of, sort of, right? The same, it's got the same setup, right? d6, and so right into the ending. So Yusupov is playing this slow game where, he's going to basically try to outplay Kasparov from an equal position, right? He's going to try to Magnus Carlsen Kasparov pretty much, right? Because black has nothing to worry about in this position, right? Just take some space. H takes, knight e4, knight d2, knight a4, knight takes e4, d takes e4, bishop takes, and now rook b1. And we can see here, if we were going to assess the position, I would give the edge to white here because of his pawn structure. All right, but it's, slight edge pawn structure. And if sometime white can open up the position where he can actually attack those weaknesses, he would have a good game. And so with this in mind, let's see what happened. So after rook b1, Kasparov played b4, and Yusupov played c takes here. Interesting. After c takes b4 is this move c3. B takes c3, knight takes c3. Right, with this double attack here and on this rook. So no problem with that. So the critical move is this move right here, b2. And then knight beat e2 here. Yeah, knight's pretty annoying here with this idea of coming to d3, right? After say a4. Okay, so interesting position. Instead, after c takes b4, Kasparov just played knight b6, a3. And here we see Yusupov basically is just a pawn up here. So I actually like what he did here. Although he could have played, Kasparov could have probably played a little stronger. But so maybe white could have played king d2. If this idea of c takes b4 doesn't work, maybe king d2 here. And I think this is just fine for white. I mean, after all, the position is wide open and the weaknesses are exposed. So that's why I said king d2 is very interesting. So out of all the games so far, I like this position the most. So a3, rook fc8, and now g6. Bishop takes, g takes f7, king takes f7. Bishop takes, knight d5 from Kasparov. Now he plays this move king d2, c3 check. And Kasparov starts playing in a very dynamic and aggressive manner. So now rook c3. He starts attacking, and he starts forcing Yusupov, not forcing, but being very persuasive and causing him to place his pieces in passive positions. So rook hc1. Of course, he wants to just go into this ending. Knight b6. Rook takes b5. Knight c4. Kasparov always played very active and dynamic, and very hard to beat him. Even though white is up material here, you can see that the dynamism of black's play, overcomes the material deficit here. Right? This is a case of position over material. You can see that white is up 2 pawns here, but let me ask you, like, who would you rather be in this position, right? Black is almost in a position to mate uh, white here, and white is 2 pawns up. Play continue b3, bishop g3 has to block the threat of g1. f4. See, just more pawns. He's like, take these pawns. So rook f4, f5, excuse me, check. Rook takes f4. So now Yusupov is up 3 pawns, and Kasparov has 2 double pawns. Watch this move. Rook c8. Goodness gracious. Open file. Look where the king is. Look how the knight has these squares covered. Yusupov plays rook g4, king h5, so more trouble. Rook h4 check, king g6, rook g4, and of course he's trying to draw at this point. King h5, rook h4, king g5. Kasparov basically says, nope, I'm not going to let you draw. f4 check, king g6, f5 check, king g5, and Yusupov resigned. Why did Yusupov resign? Let's see. Let's say rook h2, right? Knight d2, discover check, king d1. Knight b1, discover check, king e2. And now rook c2. King f1, rook d1. How do you stop that? Bishop e1, rook takes h2. Just dropping material. Very, very strong game by Kasparov. Now, to be honest here, well, we're always honest here, but this position definitely in White's favor. But Kasparov with his dynamic play was definitely able to definitely turn it around. Perhaps after knight d5, maybe not a move like king d, maybe not king d2 here. But you would have to look a little bit, go further back to really inspect White's play here. All right, after a3, but very, very strong game by Kasparov. I mean, it's kind of like you just let the dogs out and just started playing super dynamically here. Maybe instead of bishop takes e5, maybe just d takes e5. Okay, something to think about. So, same year, he runs into Yusupov again. So now, he allows e4. So he's giving everybody what they wanted. They want to play e4. He says, go ahead. c5. And now Yusupov just captures here. Bishop e2, knight c6, castle. So again, we see Yusupov satisfied with the slightest of advantages in the position. Queen c7, queen c2, rook d8. Right, nobody should lose here, right? Rook fe1. h6, bishop drops back, and now knight h5. So now black is going to snatch the bishop here if he gets an opportunity. Knight c4, bishop to e6, and now knight e3, and now knight f4. Bishop goes back to f1, knight e5, knight takes e5, bishop takes e5, and now knight c4. A lot of pieces coming off the board. Bishop takes c4. And here's Kasparov being his dynamic self again with b5. And now bishop f1. Idea behind this move is basically if bishop takes b5, then just c4. And this cuts the return of the bishop off here. Right? And also allows this knight to come here, d3, And then you can see that there's going to be a discovered attack against the h2 pawn. So in response to that, bishop g3. And then you can even harass this bishop some more with like a6, bishop a4, and maybe even moves like rook a b8. Or if you want to make sure the knight gets there, just play it immediately and play knight d3. But you can see how active black's pieces have gotten. So Yusupov does not want any of that smoke and plays bishop to f1. Rook d1. Knight to h5. Finally, Yusupov is like, okay, bishop g3. Knight takes, h takes, queen b6. Alright, so we have to give black a slight advantage here. Better pawn structure, but it still looks kind of drawish, right? You have these opposite colored bishops, right? Yeah, white has little problems right here because this c pawn is a killer, right? But can black really exploit this space advantage on the queen side at this moment? a4, trying to undermine. Of course, black's not gonna let him. Yusupov trading off everything, or trying to. g4, e6, bishop e2, and now rook a2. This pressure from Kasparov. King f1. This allows g3 to be played, if not g3, f3 to be played if he wants to. But he has to be careful not to weaken his dark squares too much. Queen d2, king g7, now g5, and just simply h5 from Kasparov. Now g3, bishop comes to e5, and now Yusupov plays this move, queen d7. One of the ideas inherent in this position is that if rook takes b2, then queen e7. All right, and let's say let's just play exactly what white wants, and then bring the rook to the second rank. And then there's no adequate way to deal with this capture here, and of course black would be mated. Of course, Kasparov is way too strong to just go pawn grabbing like that, and he just simply played rook a8. All right. Now, instead of this move queen d7, another idea could have been f4, hitting that bishop. Then let's say king g2, queen c5, bishop f3, giving giving white a little bit more space on the king side. King h3, bishop b6, and it's just a game. So I have to e5 here. All right. So black would hold the space on the queen side. White holds the space advantage on the king side in that variation. Instead, queen d7 was played. Kasparov just came back. Queen e7. So you can see the idea. He's trying to kind of just make it happen, basically. Rook a7, of course. Queen e8. And so now he figures, hey, I'll just bring my rook to the back rank. Bishop d6. And this kills everything, right? The rook can't go to the back rank. So the queen is kind of caught behind enemy lines, so to speak. King g2. Bishop e7. And now rook h1 from Yusupov. Of course, if he goes there, then black just simply snaps that off. Then you play a move like bishop c5, perhaps, or bishop g5. So Yusupov plays rook h1 So his idea is that, hey, the this pawn chain is a little weak, so I'll play bishop takes here, pawn takes, rook takes, and then now you're threatening, mate, right, on the king side here. Now, one thing about Kasparov, going into tactical melees against him is usually like a bad thing, because he's like the beast with 1,000 eyes. He just sees everything, right? I forgot which grandmaster said that about him. It might have been Nigel Short. I don't remember, but going into tactical complications with him is like going into tactical complications with Tao. It's like you usually want to avoid those scenarios, because that is like going into the wheelhouse of the opponent. So, maybe here just simply e5, right, for Yusupov. E5, maybe rook d4, right? Black is a little bit better, but so what? All right. Idea for instance, like rook d4. Maybe get a little play here after bishop g5, then f4. All right. Not too bad. Black is better. Is what it is, but um here's what happened in the game. So after rook here, Kasparov just simply played queen b1. I'm sorry, queen b1, queen b7, attacking this pawn. This pawn is hanging. See, the idea is, if Kasparov would say lesser player and play bishop takes g5, then bishop takes h5, g takes h5, rook takes h5. So here's the idea. Although Kasparov is still better, right? He just simply plays queen d8, right? He's still better. This gives more chances, right? You see that um black is up a piece, but this gives more chances for white to hold on, right? It's not his style. So Kasparov stays true to his style. He plays queen b7. This gives Yusupov no chance. So here he plays bishop f3. Right, looks like a strong move. Right? He's gonna play e5. Make the queen look foolish. But then after rook a8, the queen is just magically trapped. Okay, very strong move. Then if he tries to play e5 anyway, you just play queen takes f3 check. King takes over. So this is why after rook a8, Yusupov resigned. So that's 2 games in a row in the same year. Kasparov victorious. Right? 2 good games, but Kasparov victorious. Now, we're definitely getting in the time machine. We're going forward 20 years, right? And we're going to just briefly go over these last 2 games. These are Blitz games, right? Nigel Short versus Kasparov in the Legends Blitz match in 2015. So Kasparov is retired. He's doing this political thing, and he decides, right, to play in this Legends Blitz match against Nigel Short. Who's Nigel Short? Everybody knows Nigel Short, right, in the chess world. But just in case you don't know, right, he's a grandmaster from England, international master in 1979 at age 14, youngest at the time. GM 1984, 3-time British champion 1984, 87, 1998, candidate 85, 88, 91, and 94. And he was the strongest English player in the 80s and 90s, right, until he was finally overtaken by Michael Adams. Okay? And he was also came in second place in the 1980 World Junior Championship. All right? So here these players are, right, in the twilights of their careers, and Kasparov is faced with the Torre Attack in the Blitz match. Sticks to his King's Indian. And the argument here is that, hey, black has weakened his king side somewhat, and playing h6 followed by g5, and usually white would try to exploit that somehow. All right, d7, bishop d3, and we have the setup. Torre Attack. And we see the aggressive play on the queen side by Kasparov, on the king side by Kasparov. And here Nigel decides to play in the center of the board. Knight b3, queen e3, queen f3, queen e8, maintaining control over the squares. Knight g4, king g1, queen h5, threatening mate. Rook f e1, bishop d7. And again, it shows Kasparov's tactical awareness. Just, even in his older years. So he leaves the bait out there for short. Queen takes d5, and hindsight has it that knight e3 was better, right? Keeping the queen close to home here. So after queen takes d5, the queen is away. King h8, queen takes d7, so he takes the piece, but the king is now denuded. Of course, Nigel looked at this position. He figured, hey, I can just walk away with my king after queen h2, king f1, etc., king e2. And so what happened was queen h2, king f1, and then now rook a d8, hitting the queen. Right? Even stronger, but remember, this is a blitz game. Even stronger is queen takes g3. The game is over at this point. Right? The mate threat of queen to f2 is too strong. But this was played first. So queen takes b7. Queen to g3. Rook e2. Rook takes d3. Knight c5. This powerful chess by Kasparov. Better for short is to bring the knight to d4. Again, trying to get things a little closer to the king. Knight c5. Queen takes f4 check. King e1. Queen g3. King f1. And I remember watching the video of this right on the St. Louis Chess Club chess site. You could look it up, the Legends Blitz match. They had the video and the commentary. I mean, these moves were made like with seconds on the clock. Rook takes g3, knight e6. Rook g8, avoiding the mate in 1. Knight takes g7. And just Kasparov just showing his powers. Rook h3, king e3. Queen f4, check, king d3, and knight e5, mate, because you have double check with the rook here and the knight here. Not too much commentary again on that because it is a blitz match. But that is the end of this video on Kasparov's response to the Torre Attack. I hope you enjoyed that. We see that he was undefeated. There are a few draws in there, I believe. But the legend was undefeated against the top GMs in the world. And did I say that Nigel Short did play Garry Kasparov in 1993 for the World Chess Championship? So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it was fun and educational. Please subscribe. Please hit the like button, the thumbs up to help move my videos along in the Google algorithm so that everybody can see. If you want, share the video. I'm also on Twitter, same name, Chess Audiobooks. I'm also on Live Chess, same name, Chess Audiobooks. So if you want to play a 1-minute game, I'm on there. Hit me up. I'll play you. Also, please check the links below. I have some videos of DVDs that you could purchase from other sites, Amazon, such, that are related to today's opening. And also, please donate to my channel. These videos are helpful to you. That would help a lot in this endeavor. So I appreciate you all out there. I'm looking forward to your comments. Any requests or things that you're interested in knowing, let me know, and I'll do the best I can. And I'll see you guys soon in future videos.